You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Saturday. Promised we would do it. And for once, it is happening. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And we're just kind of hitting a bunch of different things today. I have a little bit of a plan. I did a little bit of research. But beyond that, we're just going to see where it takes us. Like a good conversation tends to go. But I wrote something today that was based off of what I've said on this podcast a million times over. It was discussing why I think the Michigan defense will be better. I laid out all the things that I've laid out here multiple times. I'm not going to rehash that now. You can check it out on Wolverines Wire. Or just go back to a previous podcast, because I've been talking about it for about 2 months about why I think the Michigan defense will be better. Whether it's staff continuity, essentially having 11 players with experience, not only the sack numbers, but tackle for loss numbers and things of that nature from previous years. It's staggering how much more some of these previous teams had higher numbers than what we saw last year. And we act like this was like the best defense that Michigan's ever fielded. Far from being true. But with that in mind, I've been seeing just kind of around, whether it was on YouTube or if it was on message boards, of people asking about Jim Knowles, the Ohio State defensive coordinator. So that kind of got me wanting to kind of look up some things. And then you also have the fact of what's Michigan's defense versus Ohio State's defense. Now, obviously, it's going to be the offense versus the other side. And another thing I want to touch on today is, weirdly, and I've seen this more than one place, I saw it on Athlon today, I saw it from some other podcast where they have Ohio State's offensive line ranked first and Michigan's ranked third, which seems really bizarre to me. So we'll talk about all of that. But let's start with Jim Knowles, actually. Did a little sleuthing here, because I wanted to see. Now, this is just pure numbers, right? This isn't going to necessarily tell us how good Ohio State's defense will be in year one. But this kind of also comes off the heels of Jerry DiNardo saying, like, it's going to be a work in progress for Ohio State. With that in mind, I looked up just what is projected to be their starters, and it's not necessarily, set in stone, but on the defensive side of the ball, they have 3 5-stars projected to start. The 2 edge rushers, JT Tumalau, Zach Harrison, defensive tackle as well, Teron Vincent. The rest, except for one, is a 3-star. You contrast that with Michigan, and Michigan's got 4 4-stars that are projected to start, and the rest are 3-stars. It's actually kind of funny how that works. Actually, I have that wrong. It's 3 4-stars because I accidentally put Rod Moore in as a 4-star. He was a 3-star. I think I had it backwards. It was still 4. RJ Moten was the 4-star. I just transposed when I wrote this down. But anyway, it's an average of 4.18 to 3.36. That said, it wasn't probably that much different last year, except for you had 2 5-stars, obviously, in Dax Hill, Christopher Hinton. And you had a 4-star, 2 4-stars in David Ajabo and Aiden Hutchinson. A 4-star in Josh Ross. So I guess it was a little different. Vincent Gray was a 3-star. Brad Hawkins was a 4-star initially as a receiver. I think he was a 3-star by the time that he came. A lot of these players obviously have had the same time on task. So it doesn't, in a way, the stars, do they matter? Maybe. And I apologize if you hear Zuri barking up a storm upstairs. Apparently she sees a bunny. I think when you look at it, do the stars matter? I'm not 100% sure that they do, because we saw what happened last year. They held yeah, there was at least 2 5-stars more than they have playing. And additionally, at least 2 more 4-stars. It's still not in the same ballpark of where Ohio State is as far as star factor is concerned. And yet Ohio State managed to still only to give up 42 points, right? Ohio State's defense, and this is important to note, we'll note it again, in yards per play was 43rd in the country. Rush defense was ranked 28th. Pass defense was ranked 96th. Yet, despite all of that, you'd look at the rush defense and say, well, Michigan's going to really be able to pass against Ohio State. And they did pass against Ohio State. But obviously, running the football was what really gave Michigan the advantage. I remember going into that game, getting in arguments with other Buckeye media. And they were like, you were just absolutely out of your mind if you think Michigan's going to run the ball on this team. This is a great Ohio State. Like they sucked against the first 2 programs and then they just shored everything up. Didn't work out that way. So, as far as what Jim Knowles has done, and so I did the same kind of breakdown. Yards per play, rush defense, pass defense, rankings, right? Where they stood compared to the other programs. We're using yards per play to stand in for total defense. I think I'd like to use total defense. I think yards per play can be a little bit more of an elucidating number. So that's what we're going with. So let's go to the year before Jim Knowles took over at Duke, 2009. Duke had the number, and keep in mind, it was still David Cutcliffe leading the charge there. He's been there for forever. 69th ranked defense in the country. 116th rush defense, 53rd pass defense. Jim Knowles comes in 2010. That number goes backwards on all fronts. 108th, 112th, and 96th. 2011, it gets better in rush defense and pass defense, 85th and 84th. Yards per play, it goes down to 113th, which just means the other teams around were just kind of better overall, but whatever. The next year, it continues to go down. 2012, it's 118th overall. 103rd rush defense, 104th pass defense. Of course, when you get turnover, personnel turnover, that type of thing can happen, right? Then finally, it starts to get better. 77th, 76th, 84th, 42, 94. That one went backwards. The rush defense, 34th. 47th, 49th, 88th. So rush defense and pass defense, really good one year, bad on the other side, and then flip those. And then goes backwards again, 105th, 66th, 78th. Then 39th, 48th, 16th. That's his final year at Duke. So then he goes to Oklahoma State, where he inherits the 56th overall defense, 38th rush defense, 37th pass defense. It gets significantly worse. 99th, 87, 118. Slightly better the next year, 81st, 67th, 102. Much better the next year, 32nd, 58th, 47th. And then finally, last year, 5th, 37th, which is what got him the Ohio State job. Now, with that in mind, people have been saying he's schematically very similar to Don Brown. And in a way, I mean, I don't want to, it's not similar to Don Brown in the sense of Don Brown at Boston College had the number 1 defense in the country. But that makes you wonder when you kind of look at that, because he hadn't had the number 1 defense in the country like every year, right? It was just in 2015 that he did. Now we're going to go off the pure defensive numbers just for the ease of me. Well, let's do yards per play. Let's look at 2015. I mean, it was yards per play, the best in the country in number 1, 2015. 2014, Boston College, 30th. Then the year before that, 2013, 92nd. So you're seeing some parallels, right? like you're picking some names out of a hat in a way. Of course, for Michigan, it just transitioned, right? I mean, it already had a really highly rated defense in 2015, right? Number 5 in yards per play. The following year, Don Brown comes and they're number 2. So, I mean, that wasn't a really big jump because Michigan was already there, right? Jim Knowles has a track record of moving backwards before he moves forwards. So it'll be interesting to see where they go from there. I do want to discuss Jesse Minter kind of in that same vein. I don't know that we're going to learn much of anything, but we will get to that here in just a moment. All right, so Jesse Minter gets a lot of crap for what happened at Vanderbilt. Now, never mind the fact that he took over a bad Vanderbilt team defensively, and they stayed kind of bad, right? Georgia State, I couldn't find the stats readily, or at least not quickly, right? From when he was there, because they weren't in the FBS or at that time. So did not look up Georgia State to see what he did with them, is what it is. But Jesse Minter took over a Vanderbilt team that was ranked 126th in defense, 91st in rush, 119th in pass. Not good. Jesse Minter comes in 120, 107, 114. Improvement, regression, improvement. Wasn't going to be much you're going to be able to do at Vanderbilt, right? I'd be curious to see total defense like 2019. I bet you if I go back, watch me be completely wrong with this. Vanderbilt was 117th the year before. Because now we're into, Derek Mason territory. And he's a good defensive dude, too. It's just that's what happens at Vanderbilt. 103rd the year before, 2017, 83rd. So, that's peak ability Vanderbilt, 82nd. So they kind of regressed a little bit, but some of the teams that they had to play were pretty good on a yearly basis, right? So I'm looking at Vanderbilt in 2016. Who were the teams that they had to play? Ranked Florida, ranked Auburn, and then obviously Georgia not ranked in 2016. Then the 2017, Alabama, Florida, Georgia. 2018, still Georgia, Florida, Notre Dame, which was ranked 5th at the time. And still, actually, when you look at it, scoring defense-wise, against Notre Dame, they lost, but they held them to 22 points. So, they played number 12 Kentucky, held them to 14. This was before Minter, of course. You're looking at 2021. They got destroyed by Georgia, 62 points. They played ranked Kentucky, held them to 34. They played ranked Ole Miss, held them to 31. I mean, that's a pretty good offense. You look at Ole Miss and what Ole Miss did last year. There are very few teams that held them to that score. Alabama held them to 21 points. Tennessee held them to 26 points. No, 31. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Held them to Alabama held them to 21. They got 31 against Tennessee, against LSU, only 20 against Auburn. But 31 was kind of their sweet spot because there was 4 games in which they scored 31 points. And Vanderbilt was one of them. The lowest that they scored was against Vanderbilt, who they only got 7. I'm sorry, not Vanderbilt. It's Baylor. They only got 7 points in that game. So you look at some of these other teams, I mean, they did a pretty good job against a relatively potent Ole Miss team, right? Of course, that's not every game. Like I said, Georgia absolutely eviscerated them. Kentucky, Kentucky scored 34 points on them. Generally, looking at some of these other schools, it's Kentucky scored a heck of a lot more. So that's good on Vanderbilt. Scoring defense-wise, I mean, they were ranked 119th. That Georgia score really probably dipped that a bit. But that doesn't even matter, right? Vanderbilt's not good. wasn't going to be good. So that doesn't even matter, the Vanderbilt of it all. What matters is the fact that he was in the NFL, and he had 1 year in which he oversaw the defensive backs, and it was a very good year. They were ranked 5th, 6th across most categories. Like, yeah, they still gave up. They in yards allowed, they were, I believe, 5th, tied for 5th. They didn't have a lot of sacks. They gave up a lot of first downs. It's, again, that's kind of the same scheme that we kind of saw, at last year. Pretty good at total. But as far as first downs and things of that nature, yeah, other teams were able to get, move the ball a little bit. But then Michigan under Mike McDonald kept them from surging forward. So it's, I still feel good about Jesse Minter. I still feel good about the direction of this defense. I'm not always right about everything. I could end up being wrong. I feel pretty convicted that this defense is going to be good. I am not that concerned about it. I feel pretty convicted because even though I listed off all those 3-star guys and everything like that, I feel like the development is good. And honestly, Michigan has done better generally, and I've said this many a time, at developing the lower end guy, the Josh Metellises, the Kwity Pays of the world, than they have, Christopher Hinton. Dax Hill ended up being pretty good. Rashawn Gary ended up being a first rounder, but no, did not play the way that people thought he would as the number 1 overall recruit in the country. Michigan's got a really good track record when it comes to that, of getting the most out of those 3-star guys, particularly defensively. Jordan Glasgow, a walk-on, right? Ryan Glasgow, a walk-on. Different coaches, so it's not apples to apples, but Michigan in general has done a really good job at developing those 3-star guys. All right. We're going to just take a few more minutes. Not going to make this a super long episode. It is Saturday after all. But we were going to continue on about this offensive line situation momentarily. All right. Shame on me for the battery in my camera. It says it has 2 bars out of 4. You assume you can do a quick 23, 24 minute episode and be fine, but it's already flashing red on me, so that's might limit the scope of where we go. Hopefully we can make it through the episode without me having to stop some video for a second and change things over, but we will see. So looking on Athlon Sports, and it mirrored something that I saw, a graphic I saw that was from a podcast somewhere. Seen other people mention it. They say that when they're doing their rankings of offensive lines, the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line, number 3, behind Ohio State and Georgia. And then you sit there and you read what some of these people are saying, and it's Georgia loses their best players. They lose Jamari Salyer and whatever, and yet, here they are. Ohio State loses Nick Petit-Frere and Thayer Munford. And yeah, they have Paris Johnson Jr., and they've got a couple other guys. But yeah, they're supposed to be the best. Michigan gets worse for whatever reason. Doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense to me. Especially because, let's face it, as good as, and I thought the heart and soul in a lot of ways of the offensive line was Andrew Vistardis, but that was more from a leadership standpoint. And yeah, sometimes he was out there mauling guys. Zach Zinter would still be my pick. I thought Trevor Keegan had an excellent year last year. I thought he was really good. Andrew Stuber was really good too. They were all good. It felt like a very good, cohesive offensive line. And then you look and it's all right, they still have the guy that I consider their best player coming back in Zach Zinter. Trevor Keegan's was at worst 3rd in my eyes. And then you add the 2nd, 3rd best center in the country, 6th-year guy in Olu Oluwatimi coming to Ann Arbor, take over in the middle, and you've got a really good option in Trente Jones, and suddenly, oh no, they're not. It's not even saying they're not going to be good, because clearly 3rd in the country out of 131 teams, that's really good. But it's just it's almost wish casting Like, I do feel like Michigan is not getting the type of credit in general that it should get as being a defending conference champion and having some of these award winners, right? Kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Blake Corum, too, yesterday, was this idea of like, okay, this guy is electric. He's one of the best. But let's go ahead and list who the best are. He's maybe a second teamer, maybe a third teamer. You know, it's kind of like that, you know. It's Michigan's got the most explosive offense in the country. How are they going to be this year? They return almost everybody. They should be pretty good. Should any of these guys be on any of a preseason watch list? Maybe Corum, throw him on third team. We can throw Olu. He's the second best center in the country last year. How's he going to do in conference this year? Put him in third. What? To me, it's just like it's this weird wish casting and this whole like, well, Michigan did it once. Let's see him do it again before we give him any kind of praise. We're still living off of Penn State's 2016 Big Ten championship, where they kind of, they earned it by beating Ohio State, but at the same time got destroyed by Michigan, lost to Pitt earlier in the year, and it just kind of backed into it. And then ever since then, it's like, oh, Penn State's so good. When they play Ohio State, you never know what's going to happen. You do know what's going to happen. They're going to play a close game in which they lose to Ohio State. James Franklin is 1-7 against Ohio State. Oh, they're right there. Oh, are they? Oh, really? Wisconsin gets that benefit of the doubt. Oh, Wisconsin. Yeah, they're so good that, this could be the year. When was the last time that they did it? That they won the conference? What, 2012? It's been a minute, man. They have to play Ohio State too. It's just really bizarre. Like in college football media, we live in this, usually it's an instant gratification world, right? Like you see like, well, that team was good last year. Therefore, they'll be even better this year. Unless you're Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson. Well, they just didn't mean it. They didn't mean to have a bad year. For Michigan, they have a good year, and it's like, well, they wouldn't have had a good year. They wouldn't have had a good year except for they had two generational talents. And now I'm not here to tell you that Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo were not that, right? But generally, I think that they might have masked some things defensively in the sense of Michigan didn't have the whole community's worth of production the way it has in previous years. I do feel like they'll have it now because they didn't need to last year. And I feel like now, hey, just need 4 to 5 sacks from like 6, 7, 8 guys. That's not necessarily the number they need to hit, but like if you can get like a couple guys, like Josh Uche led the team with 6 sacks in 2019, right? 2018, something like that. 2018. Like, you don't need to always have, 14 or 11 sacks coming from 2 guys. Yeah, that was great. But guess what? No one else had those numbers. All right, the battery's dead on the camera. So we're going to call it. That's the argument. That's going to do it. Saturday bonus episode. Thank you for watching and or listening. We will be back on Monday. We continue to break down where the Wolverines are. Thank you for watching and or listening. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.